So, welcome everybody to our Avoiding Undermeaning, Clarifying Organizational Vision webinar. Our co-trainer today is going to be Wayne Ottenbreit. Wayne is a Master of Education from University of Southern Queensland. He's got more certificates and letters to his name than I've got in my name, and he's been at it pretty much since before I was born. So he's got the expertise of many years and many events. He's also a membership with a very wide breadth of different organizations, psychotherapies, different social scientists, scholars, psychology associations, and of course he has a philosophy that is very much in alignment with BMI's fundamental expectations and goals and vision, including some of the things from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits and things like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which has inspired a lot of the upper echelons of the BMI organization. So without further ado, because you didn't come here to see me, I'm going to transfer session control over to Wayne, and he can get everything underway. So Wayne.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There we go. So I, as my introduction stated, there's a number of things that I can say about myself. I think one of the most important reasons to do that is merely to have you understand where I'm coming from, because the material that I'm going to share with you is very much comes out of the background for my own formation, what I call my own formation, my own life experiences. Some of that is going to have to do with my professional background, and some of it has to do with my personal background, but for the most part, I'm not going to be talking that much about my own kind of personal background. I am now going to switch you over to, I'm hoping I'm doing this right because this is a new platform for me. And if I'm doing this incorrectly, there we go. Whoops. Okay. Good. This is looking okay for me. I am unable to see the interface right now, so I'm going to ask that chat and so on is managed elsewhere. Does it look like everybody's okay seeing my screen?
It looks good on my end, and I'll be keeping track of chat and questions and everything for you, so you can leave me as your moderator, okay?
Excellent, thank you very much. So this is simply a holding screen. I'm a big fan kind of Dilbert, because he, in a humorous way, pokes fun at some of the organizational challenges that exist out there that sometimes are not recognized by those who especially are the decision makers. This is not at all my plan for today. My plan is not to have you tell me what you want to say and then for me to regurgitate it back to you and make it feel like we have done something profitable there. There is some worth to that, although I like to caution people to say, whenever I ask them to do an assessment, and I did ask that you guys would take a look at an assessment, whenever I ask people to do an assessment, the assessment itself, if it's a good assessment and if it's engaged with well, is merely going to report to you what you've told it. So sometimes I have people who are astounded at the insights that an assessment can give them. The astounding aspect of that really comes from themselves, right? And so you are really the agents of your own change. I am an ongoing learner, ongoing discoverer. I've been in education for a long time, 25 plus years. And I recently, and by recently, I guess maybe about half of that career, have moved into counseling, also kind of combining that with some education as well. I like to learn. I like to understand myself better. I like to understand other people better. I like to understand life itself better. I find, and it's good, I guess, I find life a very engaging, exciting process. And it's good because it's what's required of me at this point. This presentation is, I know, going to be rather dense and I think over-planned. That's a tendency that I have. I try to give as much value as I can when I'm working with other people. I'm going to hopefully do a balance between describing and prescribing. That is, giving you some information, but also what to do, or suggestions about what we can do with this information. As I was looking toward this presentation and developing some ideas for it, and I came up with that title, and that title will make a little bit more sense for you on the next screen. But I also thought about the subtitle, and I realized, another subtitle that would have worked was Nurturing Organizational Culture. And I want you maybe to have in the back of your mind the idea of culture, okay? Because I think culture is an extremely important aspect of most every undertaking that happens in our lives. And culture can be conceived of in different ways, but I hope that we're going to be able to kind of look at it from one aspect that I think is really important for business people. I am deeply affected by positive and strength-based psychology. It's something that I think has great value to people. There's been a lot of changes in our thinking over time, and I think one of the growths that has happened has been within psychology itself, where we've developed a focus, I think, that is more on the positive and what we can increase, rather than merely looking at running around and trying to correct error, even though that sometimes is necessary. When I was introduced to Bickert management and their philosophies, I did realize that there are a lot of overlaps between kind of how I approach my business, how I approach my undertakings, and their corporate philosophy. And one of the things that really struck me is what they call wealth, which I'm sure that you are aware of. I'm a big believer in being holistic. I'm also a big believer in integrity. And to me, those kind of point to the same idea. So integrity to me is the idea that if we are one way in one circumstance, we are fundamentally the same in another circumstance, in every circumstance of our lives. That does not mean that everything that happens in our lives takes place in every setting, but we are not different people in different settings. And I think that is one success in business tip, if I could suggest that to you, is that you will experience greater satisfaction, happiness, and I think success by most fully being yourselves in every aspect of your life. When I think of what Bickert Management calls wealth, I refer to that as different areas of health. And so the physical area of health is pretty common for people to understand. People usually understand their mental, or what I would actually call intellectual health. What oftentimes people call mental health is what I would call emotional health, spiritual health, and social health. And if you can imagine a tetrahedron, which is really just a four-faced kind of pyramid shape. I've got a couple examples in my office that I sometimes pull out and show clients. Each of those faces, to me, represents the physical, the mental, the emotional, or the spiritual health of an individual. And the interaction between each individual is social health. And what you'll notice about those faces is that they are connected one to the next. So your physical health cannot be disconnected from who you are intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And they impact one another. Success in one is going to pay off in another area. Likewise, difficulty in one is going to affect the others as well. And I want to draw a little bit of attention. I'm not going to overly focus on this, but I want to draw some attention to spiritual health. It is my experience, and stats say, that most people in society claim a religious belief. And religious and spiritual are not necessarily the same thing for some people, but most people claim a religious belief. And while there are appropriate ways to put up boundaries in our lives, as I said before, integrity, I think, demands that we do not change fundamentally who we are as people, simply because we are in new settings. And I think some of mismanagement and some unhappiness and dissatisfaction comes from us trying to close off aspects of ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that whatever religious background you may come from needs to even be known by the people with whom you work. But you continue to be that person in your interactions with other people. And I think that is an underused strength that I ask you guys to reflect on. So real health does not fracture the individual. We cannot be divided into different people, even if we accent certain aspects of ourselves at other times, and not so much in different settings. So let's take a look at that screen. So I don't know actually who William Willimon was or is, but some time ago, at a time in my life when I was actually looking at professional burnout myself, I came across this quotation. And he said, burnout in work, he has a different word but equivalent to, burnout in work results not from overwork, but from undermeaning. And that really squares very well with what we're going to take a look at in this presentation today, and I think is going to benefit your own approach to your business life as well as to life in general. I sincerely believe that gimmicks are a waste of time. And what we're looking at, I think, in most aspects of our life, and what we're looking at certainly with today's presentation, is not for us to find a quick fix. Those are attractive, but quick fixes, I think, are usually not good fixes. I do sometimes, when I'm talking to clients, talk about faking it till you make it. But that fake it till you make it, my intention is to say, in acting one way, we are hoping to create a reality. We are not trying to just pretend. It is not mere pretending. A superficial reality, a superficial presentation is not going to make much difference, certainly over the long term, and I'm not even sure it makes much difference for us in the short term. We are looking at process here, not so much goals, although I'm going to clarify that by saying that the best goals are actually processes themselves. So as you are looking at your year-end goals, you're looking at what is it that I want to accomplish this month? What is it that I even want to accomplish today? In some respects, at least, you're not looking for a fixed value. You're not saying, I have now fully made it. What you're looking at is you are looking at advancing. You are looking at growing. You are looking at better making present. So, process. The last kind of understanding that I just want to make sure that was in place before we get into kind of the heart of the presentation, and it's just a continuation of what we've looked at here, is that when I think of the work that I normally do, and as I'm trying to benefit you today, I usually think of three things that I'm trying to impart to people. I'm usually thinking of attitude, knowledge, and skills. Of those, the most difficult to change is attitude, but it is by far the most effective, the most important. A positive, a productive, a growth-oriented attitude can make over, can increase, can fix any number of issues that are resulting from a lack of knowledge or a lack of skill. Skill and knowledge are pretty easy to give to people who have got some motivation, but attitude is more difficult. So what you should be seeing in front of you now is a Venn diagram that I did not create. I'm not certain of the source for this. One of my difficulties is that in trying to always grow and learn, I gather so much information, and especially when I was younger, I gathered information without proper sourcing. So somebody created this. There's lots of variations about it out there. And I think I'm a very visual person. And so I like to be able to see an image of what it is that I'm trying to understand, what I'm trying to think about. Within psychology, there's this idea that when we name something, we suddenly have a new reality present, that we are better able to understand it, in some ways also control it. And I find that when I'm working with people, that very often is the case. So by being able to look at this and to conceptualize what we're looking at, I think we're going to get a little bit more understanding. I'm going to ask you guys a question in a moment about this diagram that you can share with the moderator. So if we look at what they call area number one, they're not organized really very well in terms of a numerical pattern, but it's not a big diagram, so we can find it. So area number one, what they're calling your passions. if we exist only in the area of our passions, we're going to have a problem probably with self-indulgence. It doesn't go beyond us, okay? This area represents what we love doing, what we want to do, okay, our passions. Area number 6, they call it your purpose. It's what's needed, it's what you care about, but we can also add that it's what we can be paid to do, okay? Paid well, paid sufficiently, not merely some money, but enough money that the effort that we're expending has some practical value as well. Purpose is not quite the same thing. Purpose has a much bigger meaning than that, but we're looking here at functional purpose, okay? Area 7, your gifts, what you're uniquely good at, what you do well, what comes easily to you. That is where I asked you to do some assessment in advance of the presentation. We're going to get to that actually quite near the end of the presentation this morning, but there's going to be some real value in that for you. When we look at the overlaps, so area 2, if we're operating only in, go back a little bit. If we're operating only in area 7, where your gifts are, where you're uniquely good at things, you're going to tend to experience frustration. You're good at it, but you don't have a passion for it. You're not able to make a living out of it. If we're operating in area 6, your purpose, what you can make money off of, well, that's self-sacrificing. And I'm not totally against self-sacrifice, but self-sacrifice, the best self-sacrifice goes beyond mere self-sacrifice and is bigger than that. Okay, it's a service both to others and to oneself. We typically don't operate in only one of 1, 6, or 7, those kind of peer groups. We tend to operate in areas of overlap. So if you're in area 2, that area of overlap, the diagram is showing you that this is probably going to be a place where you are not properly appreciated, okay? It's a place that's not very sustainable. It's a place that from a business perspective should maybe be monetized, but it's not the best place to be, okay? If we're operating in area 4, the overlap for area 4, we're going to tend to be disappointed, okay? It is an area that if we want to make some improvement, we should learn to do it better, okay? If we're operating in area 5, we're going to tend to be disengaged. It's an area where we are going to probably lack energy, especially if what we're doing is merely making money. I've never had the kind of success that shows me that being wealthy is empty. I'd still like to have that experience. But if it is mere money, then there's a certain point where accumulation is not satisfying us. Okay, we've got our needs met, we've got some extras we can share with other people and so on, but it's not fully satisfying to us. That is an area where maybe we need to learn how to say no to some things. So before I ask you a question, and hopefully you've got a bit of an understanding of those different areas and kind of a basic approach to what we're meaning by those 7 areas. And obviously area 3, if we're able to combine all 3, what they call the sweet spot perhaps, where we feel deeply fulfilled, okay? Which is really answering a lot of what we are seeking for professionally, and I think even deeper than professionally. Oftentimes we fall into situations, including business situations. So very, very briefly, I fell into my first career because I met the woman that I wanted to marry, and I realized I needed to have a career. At that point, I was pretty happy just being in university, taking classes, learning things, changing my major every couple semesters. But then I realized I had to kick myself in the pants and do something, okay? And so I made a career decision based on some knowledge that I had that I thought would work, and got into it and have been essentially in it basically for 25 years, although I've made some modifications to fine tune. But I didn't understand the full impact of the decision that I made at that point. It has basically been satisfying. It has provided well for me, for my family. It has allowed us to do many of the things that we wanted to do in our lives. But 25 years ago, I didn't know that, okay? So I made, I guess, a good choice, but I made a kind of a good choice by accident. And I think we've all had experiences like that. Frankly, I don't think that's a terrible thing, okay? We need to make choices. We need to act. That's going to come up a little bit later as well. There's, some reflection I think is a very important thing, but a life of mere reflection of analysis paralysis is not what we're looking for either. Okay, we need to live, we need to do, not merely just think. Okay, so when you fall into a place, okay, if this has happened before, if this is where you currently are, you feel that you've fallen into something, I wouldn't simply dismiss that. There's some meaning in that. You arrived in that place from some origin. For various reasons, you are in that place. They are not usually mere accidents. Accidents come about as a result of choices. There's an organization with which I was working that said they didn't like to use the term accident. It was actually an organization that was looking at the choices that young people make in regards to substance use and the harms that can come to them thereafter. And they said 95% of the time, we're not talking about accidents. We're talking about choices that people made, maybe not looking at the consequences, but it was choice. There are very few true, pure accidents. So we end up in situations that have some meaning to us. Okay, we got there in a process. Keep that in mind. That might be something for you to reflect on. The nature of today's presentation and the fact that this is so very personal means that I can't really address that with you in this format. But do some reflection about how you arrived where you are. I sometimes think about this as kind of like a dot to dot. So that I look back over my life and I say, you know, this experience, all of these experiences together have resulted in where I am today. And at the time, strangely, if you've ever done dot to dots when you were younger, you can, or worked with a young child, you can be like, oh, I know exactly what this picture is, right? But that is because we have the perspective, even before those dots are connected, of being able to see a relationship between them. For young children, and for most of us when we are in the midst of the process, we don't see the connection, but there is connection. I think, I don't want to say absolutely, but in many, many cases, that experience of yours, this experience of yours, this learning of yours, all of those things together have resulted into something bigger. I'm not trying to make that mystical. I don't believe in, the universe has called you and has planned out a place for you and so on. But I believe that you have either unconsciously been moving yourself towards something, or that you have created something that you can make into something else. Okay, so I keep that in mind as well. So if you find out, in a moment I'm going to ask you the question, if you find out that you are in a place that you're not so happy about, don't, if I can use the idiom, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You'll notice that when I talked about those overlap areas, or the pure areas of 1, 6, and 7, the overlap areas of 2, 4, and 5, I didn't merely say this is where you are, as the Venn diagram says, and it's self-indulgent, it's unappreciated, it's disappointed, etc., etc., etc. I said this is what you could do with it. You could learn to monetize. You could learn to say no, right? That is about accepting the reality of where you are. I think that's an important aspect of mental health, if I can throw that in, is to accept reality. Not accept reality as merely this is what is and I have to accept, but this is what is. Then deal with what is. And that's a Covey thing. We'll look at a little bit of Covey too, okay? I also want to make a suggestion to you that if you've never gone to, you can see, I hope you can see in the bottom right-hand corner their website, Art of Manliness. Please don't be put off by the title of that website. It's a pretty great website in many ways. If you want to go to that website sometime and take a look at podcast 78, and in that they have a podcast, a talk that examines the idea of passion in your work. And the typical approach is that people are encouraged or advised to find something they want to do that they can be passionate about. And the essential thesis of the podcast is, no, you bring the passion to your work. I think that makes a lot more sense. And because they do a really good job of it on the podcast, I don't want to waste your time on it. But I really encourage you to listen to that because I think there's worth in it. Okay. I want to ask you guys now to share with the moderator. So I'm not going to be able to see those responses right now, but I'm going to ask you to share with the moderator, which section are you in from 1 to 7? Are you merely in a pure area of 1, 6, or 7? Are you overlapping in a 2, 4, or 5? Or have you in some manner achieved a 3? Okay. I want you to do a little bit of reflection on that and some action. The very aspect, the very fact of you sharing that by making it present in even, digitally, is for you to now enter into a different understanding of it. Okay? Think a little bit about that. I'm going to assume that most of us want to be in 3. Okay? If you don't want to be in 3, I'd be interested to understand why. But I think most of us want to be 3, and I think most of us, at least at some times, are not in 3. I can say actually that most of the time I think I am in 3 professionally. I'm pretty happy with what has happened for myself in my life. And I actually shouldn't even phrase it what has happened. I think in lots of ways what I've caused to have happened in my life. So do a little bit of thinking about that, okay? We are going to talk about what we can do about this, okay? But again, we're talking process. We're not talking absolute finite goal that you can check it off your list. In fact, I don't even think if we could do that, we would want to do that or should want to do that, okay? I think lots of what life is growth. And so we want to keep on moving, keep on changing, keep on being better realizing what we are capable of. So there are not foolproof techniques, although today I think we're going to look at some things that are very valuable and very powerful. But wherever we are at on this diagram, this Venn presentation, if it's embedded in meaning, I think it makes success and satisfaction more likely. And by meaning here, I could also use the term purpose, but purpose is already used in the Venn, so there can be a confusion there. We're talking about a deeper understanding of your place in life. Okay, and I don't want to over accent what we're talking about here today because we're talking about business. But remember I said I don't think any aspect of our lives can be cut off absolutely from any other aspect. So if you're familiar with Covey, which I think at one hand Covey did some brilliant work, on the other hand Covey I think would have said himself that he didn't really create this, it was merely some discovery of what was already there. So Covey talks about the first 3 essential habits. So the first essential habit is for us to be proactive, that is to take responsibility for our lives, to show some creativity in what we do. Second is for us to begin with the end in mind. That is to say, where am I trying to go? What am I trying to be? What am I trying to accomplish? Have in mind a place to which you want to advance. And again, I don't think that should be a finite place. I think it needs to be processed. But what direction do you want to be? Sometimes you have very clearly a picture of that. Other times you don't have a clear picture, but you either know at least which directions it is not, so turn the other direction, or you've got a general sense of the direction itself. Not specific, but at least general. Okay? And the third of these primary habits, what he calls the private victory, so these are about ourselves, not our relationship to others, is to put first things first. So that is to prioritize. Okay, make use of your time and your energies in a way that makes sense. But Covey also said that had to be within a background. It had to be nested within a background of what he called principles, which I think is actually a pretty great term for it. And again, because of the nature of today's format, I can't really get into the details of that. I encourage you to take a look at Covey's work, or maybe we have a chance to talk about this another time. But if you've got a deeper understanding of what is it that you are trying to do, I think first of all, these habits come easier, and they also make it more likely that you're going to be able to be effective. Okay. This is a little bit of showing off, even though I am unable to speak it myself. So Nietzsche said, hat man sein Warm des Lebens, so vertragt man sich fast mit jedem Wie. So if you have a why to life, you can deal with almost any how. This is actually quoted by Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. It's pretty fundamental to logotherapy. That is to say, if I have this embedded meaning, okay, that blue circle that I've got down below, if I have a why, if I know what this is about, even just in pieces right now, if I haven't done a fuller exploration, if I've got that, then I can work past obstacles. There's a reason to work past obstacles. If I don't have even some basic understanding of that, it's very difficult for us when we hit the hard times to keep moving. When it's straightforward, obviously, no big deal. Okay? But when it's difficult for us, that's when we really need to dig deeper. Another way of taking a look at this, some seek knowledge for the sake of knowledge. That's curiosity. Others seek knowledge that they may themselves be known. That's vanity. But there are still others who seek knowledge in order to serve and edify others. That is charity. So Bernard of Clairvaux uses the term knowledge here. I think we can expand and not necessarily talk about knowledge, although knowledge is, again, I think, a very high good. We're also looking here at the service that is happening through your own businesses. Okay? So some seek to be successful in business simply for that purpose. Okay? There's a higher or a deeper, whichever way you want to approach this, reason for us to find this success. And I think when you connect with that, that's what's going to give you the energy to keep going. Not only in the tough times, but that's especially where the rubber meets the road, but also to give you the energy to really be vibrant in how you become that person and how you serve the people with whom you work. And I'm making a little bit of a supposition myself there, although I do think it's a universal principle that the best undertakings are those done with and for in the service of others. Okay? It's hard for me to imagine a legitimate undertaking, a legitimate business even, that is not in some manner, and at least I think actually fundamentally, in service of others. I encourage you to reflect on that for yourselves. Okay? So this is, again, a reminder here. We need to apply what's happening in today in terms of this presentation, this webinar. We need to apply it. It's not merely the gathering of information. It's not merely the gathering of insights. There are lots of great books out there. I have behind myself shelves of books that I bought because I think they're awesome books, but that's a guess because I haven't read them yet, right? And even if I read them, I need to do something with them. Same thing with this webinar. Frankly, I think this webinar is quite useful for you. I put it together for that purpose. But if it's merely going to be I sat down and I listened to a guy talk for a while and saw some nice colors on the screen, that's not really that useful. We need to act. Okay? Some of you may also be familiar with another aspect of positive psychology, flow theory. Somebody once did the favor for me of telling me that Mihalyi Csikszentmihalyi's last name is pronounced Csikszentmihalyi, but I don't actually know that that's true because I don't speak Czech, but I'm going to make that assumption. Okay? I want you also to do a little bit of reflection on how this could be applied to your circumstances, your life, but especially also what we're talking about here for business. I want to make a slight change to this diagram, to this illustration. Challenge level and skill level are perceived. Okay? I'm a big believer in most of my life about objective truth, reality, what really is. But in my counseling work, in my interactions with other people, even aside from professional, my personal interactions with my wife, with my children, perceptions are extremely important. So not what reality is, but what the other person understands it to be. That doesn't trump everything, but it matters. Okay? So in terms of flow theory, trying to do this a little bit quickly because we have got some other things that we want to get to. What Csikszentmihalyi did here is he helped us to understand, visualize again, a way of us working towards flow, or maybe not quite as nicely, working away from some negatives. So he says it's a kind of a dialectic, kind of a combination or dynamic between what we perceive our challenge to be and what we perceive our skill to be. So I'm going to use anxiety for a moment as an example before we talk about the better example. So when I am working with somebody who's experiencing difficulties with anxiety, one of the analyses that we might do is for me to say, this is one way to conceptualize this is to say that you are looking at challenges that you believe are high, okay, a situation that has a high challenge, and you believe yourself to have an inability to cope with that challenge. So what do? Well, there are two axes here. So we either change the challenge, or we change the skill, or we change our perceptions of the challenge or the skill. Okay? So are my skills really as low as I think they are? If they are, do something about it. If they are not as low, also do something about it. Recognize that. Come into your strength. If it's appropriate, reduce my challenge. Maybe I'm not ready for the challenge at that high a level, so I need to drop it down a bit. Or is my perception inaccurate? Okay, but let's look at flow. So that's what the theory is named for, and that's what Csikszentmihalyi was trying to get us toward. Flow is often talked about with examples for artists or athletes, people that are able to kind of enter into a zone, that can lose track of time, okay, are so absorbed by a task. Not a place to be all the time, because I imagine that there are some negative consequences that go along with that practically, but there's many good things in it as well. So flow is when you find the combination of I am uniquely, and uniquely might need to be kind of in air quotes there, I am uniquely qualified for this task, and the undertaking matters. And when you find that combination taking place, you enter into what I would also call a sense of adventure, a sense of opportunity. There's an excitement that goes with that. And it's sustainable for the long-ish term. Again, we need to take breaks, come back down to your real life, sleep, eat, interact with other people, and so on. But that is, I would suggest, a place that you want to be at least some of the time. Okay? How can you apply that to your business? What is it about what you are doing or want to do, and maybe it requires you changing, maybe it requires you being proactive? What is it that you think you are well skilled to do and matters? That's another way we could talk about challenge. It matters. That you see its implicit value, and that others hopefully do as well. I would recommend, if you're not familiar with Covey, if you're not familiar with flow theory, even though they get a bad rap lots of times, you take a look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia does a nice job most of the time in giving us a good summary of things, okay? And so if you just Google that, or whatever search engine you want, or you just go straight to Wikipedia, or you go to YouTube, because some people do a good job on there, and you do some better understanding, maybe it's going to, if it hasn't clicked for you, maybe it'll click for you a little bit better if somebody else delivers to you what we're talking about there, if you're not familiar with it. But I think there is a great deal of potential, power, and energy in being able to understand this. And as I said before, although I'm delivering to you a presentation about business, it's not merely business. This goes beyond. These attitudes, and to a lesser extent, these skills and this knowledge should be of benefit to you beyond business. Last screen that I want to take a look at with you today, and this screen is the one for which I asked you to do that assessment. If you were not able to do that assessment, I want to encourage you to take a look later on. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a background here in case you didn't do it, in case something broke down there. of what I was hoping to have happen. Okay. So you were supposed to go to, and I don't want to click it yet because I can't remember if I actually embedded the website here, if that's going to just take me to a black screen. But you're supposed to go to the website viacharacter.org, V-I-A character.org. VIA stands for Values in Action. It's another significant, strong stream within positive psychology. And the theory behind VIA is that individuals contain within ourselves a combination of 24 distinct strength areas. So this research is based on multiple years, I would say probably thousands of individuals, and a survey of the wisdom and or religious traditions across the world, different cultures. And so the researchers, primarily Seligman and Peterson, have arranged these 24 strength areas and there's a wide variety of them, and said that these show up in different combinations for different people. And the combination matters, but we primarily look at the top 5. I've been using the assessment, I think 13 years, and I test myself every 2 to 3 years. And the theory, and it holds for me, is that they show up in this certain combination consistently. I haven't seen this in the literature, but it's my belief that becomes more clear as you become older. And I am unfortunately becoming older. I'm getting quite good at being older. And so I see it more now that this is how, this is how my top 5 come together. The top 5, if I look back at my records, there's probably 7 different qualities that in this 13 or so years have shown up in my top 5. And in the last number of years, it's settled to the same 5, although they sometimes change position in 5. But now it's starting to be, nope, they're really pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the way it is. And so Seligman and Peterson and this strength-based approach generally say that this is kind of unique to you. Okay, the combination is unique to you. And although all 24 are present for you, the top 5 is where we focus. Okay. What I usually ask people to do when I'm working with them, and usually I look at it more than profession. I look at it in terms of their family life, their social life, some other areas that are also important to them, but we're just going to look at it for you professionally, is I ask them to look at what the 5 areas are and look at how is that present for me currently? How am I making that happen in my life right now? And how can I do that better? So the currently is both supposed to be a recognition that it's present for you, hopefully. Sometimes it's a recognition that it's not present for you. And that can explain part of why we're having some frustration and difficulty. And the better is to give you a view towards growth for the future. And the better is probably an ongoing process. It is something that you probably can dialogue with other people, a spouse, close friends, business partners. Okay, you can talk about those kinds of things. Something that came to my attention recently was when I was speaking with a colleague who also works in this area. I had never before looked at my lowest strengths, and I have a tendency to call them my weaknesses, but properly speaking, they are my lowest strengths. And seeing them, seeing what they were, I was like, wow, yeah, that is so obvious in my life. I don't have that. Or I shouldn't phrase it that way. Seligman and Peterson would be upset with me over that. That is not as present in my life, right? And I can see those things. And what that does for me is it gives me a little bit of permission, for one thing, not to judge myself that I'm not doing this thing, but also not permission to therefore absent myself from ever, okay? What it does is it says to me, if you need to have this strength, this quality present, prep yourself, get ready, because it takes more energy from you. So I believe it's very useful for you to take a look at those top 5, kind of do that process that I've talked about, but then also take a look at, and it's a little random that it's the bottom 3, but take a look at those bottom 3 or so and recognize and this should ring true for you. You should see the top 5, you should see the bottom 3 and say, yeah, that makes sense. And think, where do I need these lesser strengths, lesser present strengths, and therefore I have to prep myself for that. Now, how does this affect you professionally beyond what we've talked about already? Your organization is an organization, okay? There's a culture to it. It is not merely yourself. If it was yourself, there is still a culture, but it's not merely yourself. It is something that you may have the responsibility for building, for maintaining, because you're the CEO, okay? Or you are the boss, or whatever title you may have. It is something that you have some responsibility for, some interest in, but there are individuals involved in this, and they have their own strengths, their own approaches. They contribute to the culture, and who they are as individuals changes the culture, for better, for worse. Culture is, it seems, best developed over time. It is best that changes, and they need to happen, changes in culture are organic. Okay, they're not merely imposed. That's, strictly speaking, not really culture. And it's usually very disruptive, usually very unhealthy. Take a look at, and I want to give you a tool for this in a minute, take a look at how you can incorporate the strengths of your employees, your partners, your colleagues, to better bring about the success that not only do you want for your business, but I think that your business has to offer. Remember, your business is a service. And if it's a service, it has something good to contribute, to make society, to make the world, to make life better. Okay? And that is not mere talk. I really believe that substantially. What can you do about that? Well, first of all, from the perspective of BMI, Bickert Management, remember wealth. Okay? You and everybody else in your organization has those 5 domains present, and you're responsible for using them well, developing them well. But also go back to via character. And this is where I'm hoping I have, I don't, where I thought I had viacharacter.org listed, just so that you have the visual on it. That next screen was some of my over planning that we're not going to make use of today. But go back to that website, and what they have done there is they have, I'm just going to stop sharing, see what we've got going here. So what they have done is they've developed a whole lot of tools for people to be able to not only understand, so that's part of the describing, but also prescribe. What do I do about that? I've got this understanding, but what am I going to do with this understanding? How can I make it more effective for my organization? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where I want to stop, and I want to field some questions. I want to see if there's some things that you'd like to ask of me that I haven't addressed that I think is that you believe would be worthwhile and helpful for you.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the questions tab, and it appears that there is a little bit of a latency on it. So if you guys have posted questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I can see the chat. I'm not sure why there's that lead time on the questions. So copy and paste would be the fastest way. I know there are some questions, so we'll just give it a few seconds here to come online in the chat.
So I'm scanning through them myself as well. If you notice questions that I don't see, please bring them to my attention.
Can you see the questions?
Well, I can see chats. So I'm looking through the chats, and thank you for following up with some links there for me. When I go to questions, okay, so I can see. Good. Okay, so I've got at least a few of the questions. I can start with those. So verbal from Michael that I will maybe take a look at afterwards. How to stay focused on your end goal. So it seems to me that some of that Some of that is going to be about like determination. Okay, I think that's an accurate answer, but it's not the pretty answer. What it is it's a commitment. This goes back to actually the podcast. So the idea of passion. So I think some of the problem with us saying find your passion, work in it is that it becomes very external to us. So the locus of control, what Covey calls being proactive, is outside of yourself. So if it's always going to be about I'm excited, then you are never developing determination. You're never developing, I think, an integrity, if I can use that word again. You're not taking responsibility for that. But at the same time, there is excitement. So I think when you click in, it's like plugging something into the wall. When you click into the power source, you're energized, and that gets you moving. This is part of the place of emotion in the personal life, right? So my counseling, as a counselor, I deal a lot with emotion. If emotion didn't exist, I probably would not have a job, okay? Emotion is not a bad thing. I have, self-disclosure, I have daughters, only daughters. And so there is, I'm going to be a little stereotypical, but I think it's reality, there's a lot of emotion. And so in our household, we'll often talk about the idea that emotion is not bad, but emotion is not the decision maker, right? Decision is your reason. It's intelligent use of your mind. So that's where I think you also have to, when you're keeping your focus, you need to give yourself the intellectual, the rational understanding for why am I doing what I am doing? What is the reason? Okay, and that's that understanding, that purpose, okay, whether it's Nietzsche or it's Frankl or whatever. There are also some practical things that you can do. Some of those practical things are the people around you. So if you are not in a sole proprietorship, if you are working in a business with other people, particularly if you've got a partner or partners, then you meet with one another. You talk with one another and you say, how do we sustain what we're doing? First of all, we need to clarify what it is that we are trying to do, which is kind of what we were talking about today. Again, in a process way, not in a check these boxes. How do we sustain our goal, our process goal, right? And when we start to fall down, what's the accountability? There is what I would call character development in that, right? And that is, I think, an important and accurate answer, but not an easy answer. Okay, it's something that we have to keep on working on. How can you avoid deceiving yourself through confirmation bias when using these self-assessment strategies and tools? There is no absolute answer to that, okay? So when I said, if the tools, actually maybe I did say it during the presentation, when assessments are well developed and when we use the assessments, when we answer the assessments well, then we get good feedback, we get good answers. A well-designed assessment is going to make it, I think, less likely that we're going to feed into confirmation bias. We're going to less likely feed into who I am. But aside from that, I think here are the things. One is the very idea that you're doing an assessment that is, at least in your brain, is only for your information. Now that reality may change later on, and I think in an organization it's good to share results. But at the beginning, you're thinking these results are only about me, for me, okay? Remember also that the results are all strengths. So looking at the VIA is not, it cannot tell you anything negative. It might tell you something that, oh, I wish I was higher in this or whatever, but the results that you get are always going to be positives, okay? I think another thing, though, is for us to interact. So remember that social aspect, okay? Social health, connection with other people. There is also a business aspect to that. So when I am in interaction with my partner, with my colleagues and so on, especially if we've developed a healthy culture where people can be open and sincere and honest, then people can give me feedback about, you know what, I don't really see that present, right? Or this seems to be very present for you. And if you take a look, and I'm only right now talking about this one particular assessment, not all the assessments out there, the website viacharacter.org has got a lot of ways for you to both grow your strengths, to practice your strengths, and I think at the same time it helps you to evaluate really how present are those, because you, and if we're talking about confirmation bias, then it's going to be a little more difficult because we're going to tend to perceive things differently maybe, but the people around you are going to be able to see how present, how easy it is for you to give evidence. Not that you have to prove it, but it's just going to happen, right? How do I know that so-and-so is a kind person? Well, look at the things that she does, right? How do I know that I'm a person with zest, which is one of the VIA signature strengths? Well, these things are happening. They naturally happen in my life, right? So I think that's a way for us, but again, as I started at the beginning, there's no absolute way to do it. We are complicated creatures, and we can do any number of things for and against ourselves, knowing and not knowing, right? Yes, I do. So soliciting feedback on strengths from those close to you. The basic answer is yes. You need to be prepared for what you may receive, and you need to be prepared for the sources, especially if you have a position of authority over somebody else. That is going to affect how accurate the feedback is going to be. There are mechanisms that you can use to make that more or less a factor, but in general, our interactions with other people are extremely important. And the more people can be themselves, the best versions of themselves. So people who are seeking to show integrity, who want to be honest, who want to serve the organization and stuff, or better maybe is the organization's vision, those are going to give you better feedback. Because they'll view it as, and again, if you've got good relationship, people are going to view this as, my doing this serves so-and-so, and my doing this serves the vision that the organization has that I've bought into. Okay. Is it normal that you feel fulfilled placing yourself in box 3, but when you start failing to complete a task and a department progress is dependent on you, you start to feel anxiety? Yeah, I think that is true. So the Venn diagram that we looked at in slide 3, I think, and then flow theory, I think there's some connection to them, but they are not the same thing. And even if they were kind of speaking about the same thing, flow is not a constant state. We can't stay in flow constantly. Flow is not really concerned about the practicalities of our life. Okay, flow is a good, but it is not constant. And so we're going to slide out of flow, sometimes for very good reasons. We can sit in 3, but 3 is also affected by, so 3 is the sweet spot. 3 is also affected by energy, by emotion. And those are also not constants. So we want to take a look and say, take advantage of energy, emotion when it benefits us. But then if it's not helping us, we don't suppress it because that's unhealthy, but we don't give it as much attention, right? So again, from a counseling perspective, if I'm working with parents about their relationship with their children, if I spontaneously feel acts of love and care and kindness for my children, then I'm basically going to go with that, But if I'm feeling angry, if I am being very impatient and so on, then I'm going to not immediately act on that. Right? I'm going to process that a little bit and think, what is it that I should be doing here that's a benefit for my kids? Now, I should qualify that to say that just because I feel kindness does not mean that I should, go out and buy them everything that I think that will make them happy. There are aspects there that we also need to think about. But in general, what benefits you, access it fairly quickly. If it is not going to benefit you, then do some processing with it. And again, I would suggest really drawing on other people. And most of the time, I don't want to undercut what I do or what Bickert Management does, but in many ways, the things that we do as professionals are available to people in their normal networks. If you've got good family and friend social networks, then you've got access to a lot of strengths that some people don't have such easy access. At the same time, that doesn't mean you should feel embarrassed to access professionals. I've seen professionals for various things in my own life. Sometimes professionals are able to cut through some of the mitigating circumstances faster than our friends and our family can. But we should also not draw too much attention to those factors too. We're going to look for what's going to help us and not spend too much time on the things that are going to throw us off.
Fantastic. Well, I see our time has ticked up just a little bit here. Any of the extra questions will be filtered through to me anyway, so I can take a look at them, and I can work with Wayne if need be to get those all resolved. So nobody has to feel like their questions, even if we didn't have enough time today to answer them, they won't go unanswered. Don't worry about that. So thank you very much, Wayne. That was extremely insightful. And I know, at least personally, that introspection is always something that you need to be reminded of on a consistent basis in order to be effective at it. So thank you very much for your time, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure working with you guys. I hope this is of use to you, and I wish you every best success.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Wayne.